Hey, welcome to this week's podcast, which is all about balancing treats and nutrition and just finding that harmony in your child's diet. I mean, look, the enjoyment of food, it's such an important part of being human, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Well, it's all our celebrations.
Yeah.
We gather around food.
Yeah, absolutely. And it involves all of our senses. It's just such a big part of life, isn't it?
And when you think of babies,
Yes.
you know, like it's a massive part of our development.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just learning touch food, taste food.
Yeah.
It's a basic
life.
Human need.
Absolutely,
It
is.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing is that when you're eating treats or you're eating, you know, lots of desserts and sweet, delicious things, you just take it for granted and you lose that sense of pleasure in the treat. Also, you know, treat food is often, it's only good for us in small amounts. So
I think it's treat food because our body gets unwell if it becomes more than
an isolated treat. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a question that comes up a lot for a lot of parents is how do we teach our kids to find the balance with treats? Because, I mean, it is all about balance, isn't it? You and I are not here to say don't give your kids treat food, but it does need to be put into the context of balance.
Definitely. And again, this is not just about food when you teach kids this skill of moderation.
Yeah.
You know, it's so important for all of us to learn for our health and well-being to find moderation, to find a middle road.
Yeah.
And I guess for me as parents, we have to model and teach our kids moderation.
Yeah.
You know, if we say to our kids, hey, don't eat jelly beans, they're bad for us, and then we scoff a handful of jelly beans, they're going to do what we do.
Yes.
But I think it's really important to educate kids on why certain foods are just for special occasions.
Yeah.
You know, why?
Yeah, I was going to say, so why then should we not just, because, I mean, I was always tempted to just blanket ban treat food, particularly when my kids were little.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, that's not helpful, is it?
It's not helpful. And there's heaps of reasons why just blanket banning treats is not helpful. The first one is that if you think of yourself, if I say to you, Georgia, you're not allowed any chocolate.
Yeah.
You're just going to think about
that's
chocolate.
All I want.
Exactly. So, and that's what happens to our kids,
yes.
you know, because kids are naturally curious. Kids want to do what their friends are doing.
Yes.
And if we just put a blanket ban on and say, no, you cannot have any of that, it makes them want it even more. And it kind of gives that treat even more currency than it probably originally had.
Yes.
And if we put that blanket ban on and say no to that, it can lead to these feelings of deprivation.
Yeah.
And it kind of sets up this really unhealthy relationship with food where there's just so much more put on food than something that nourishes
human
us.
requirement.
It just all this other stuff, emotional stuff, gets loaded onto food.
Yes.
Another reason why we don't want to blanket ban treats is we actually want our kids to learn how to moderate themselves and how to regulate their own kind of intake.
Yes.
Yeah, and we all need to learn this. So if we blanket ban and our kids, they never get the chance with us to have one Easter egg instead of 10, they never learn the skill.
Yeah.
You know, they never learn to link what they put in their mouth with how they feel.
Yeah.
So I really think, for me, I think teaching kids how to self-regulate is just huge. And that means with food as well.
I know my kids have had several run-ins with crappy food, making them vomit.
Yeah.
And they have learnt so much from those experiences, from those. And I'm not saying that you should let your kids eat food until they vomit, but you know, inadvertently at parties when I haven't been watching, my kids have scoffed too much food that hasn't agreed with them and they've been unwell as a result.
Yeah.
But as I said, the learning was worse than having to clean it up, put it that way.
Well, and that's
better than having to clean it up. Yeah.
That's the thing. I remember Jack when he was only about 5,
Yeah.
and we'd been at a little party as well.
Yeah.
And we were coming home in the car, and he said, "Mum, I don't feel very well." And he said, I think he just said, "I don't feel very well." And I just said to him, "Yeah, if I drink soft drink and have a lot of sweet stuff, I don't feel very well either.
Yep.
I get a really spinny head and I feel yucky." Because I didn't want to say to him, "Well, you shouldn't have eaten this."
Totally.
I more wanted him to go, "Oh, that stuff that I ate a lot of and how I'm feeling are connected."
Yes.
So
perfect.
that down the track, he can kind of still have like a bit of chocolate,
Yes.
but 1 instead of 5.
Yes.
And I think I noticed today, like I think of me as a kid and my brothers and Easter time, and we were able to delay gratification.
Yep.
We were able to savor that big Easter egg for a few weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it was because we didn't get a lot of treats.
Yeah.
Like, my mum's going to be laughing listening to this. I'm going to sound like a deprived child, but we didn't. Mum and Dad were really healthy, health-conscious parents, and so we didn't have chocolate through the year.
Yes.
So when we got Easter eggs,
you wanted to make it last.
Yeah. And it was like, I think that's a great skill.
Yes.
Being able to delay gratification has massive benefits.
Yes.
Over your lifetime.
Yeah.
Another reason not to blanket ban treats is that you can set up this kind of negative association with certain foods. So where, you know, we label foods as bad or forbidden, this kind of it's never
connecting
a good
emotion
thing.
With food, isn't it?
Totally. It's definitely doing that. And then it can lead to these feelings of guilt or shame when we're eating these foods. And for some of us, when we feel guilt and shame, rather than savoring the food and actually really enjoying it, we gulp the food.
Yeah, great point.
And we don't save it. So rather than just having 1 piece of chocolate and actually really enjoying it, we have the whole bar. And then we feel shit about ourselves, and then there's more shame and guilt, which leads us back to eating more. But it just sets up this whole unhealthy cycle, this relationship with food that's not supportive.
Yeah.
Another reason you don't want to blanket ban treats is your kids will be invited to parties. And what's really important when you're a kid and a teenager is to fit in with other kids.
Yeah.
And all across their life, beyond a certain age, you're not going to be with your kids at certain places. And when they're older, it's not going to be chocolate; it's going to be alcohol.
Yes.
And so you want to think of back, like right in the early stages, that you want your kids to be able to regulate and make choices for themselves.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of hovering over them, making choices, saying you can only have this and you can't have that, I don't think they learn. I don't think they develop the skills.
Yeah.
I think it's important when they're little to say, "Hey, I think you've had enough.
Yes.
Just wait a moment and see how you feel."
And for me as well, I don't know how you feel about this, but when my kids were little, before they really even understood what treats were, like I know a lot of parents would say, "Oh, you just let your kids try these things from a really young age." I personally chose not to.
Yeah, I was the same.
Because while I had control, I chose to take control.
Yes.
But I understood that as soon as they realised what was inside that wrapper, or, you know, once they got wind of other kids eating treat food, I 100% allowed them to also have treat food.
Yeah.
I kind of risk reduced by directing them towards treats that I felt better about them having.
Yeah.
Like instead of having, you know, a brightly coloured bar or something with loads of colourings in it, I would choose like plain chocolate, like a Freddo Frog, over a glittery kind of chocolate bar, for example. So
a really important point around parties and celebrations is if you have that blanket ban and your kid is the only kid at the party that's not allowed the cake or the brownie or the lollies, I think that's really full on for your kid.
Yeah.
And I mean, you parent how you want to parent.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think this can lead to sneaking food or
Yeah.
hoarding food, and it can just lead to a lot of problems again. I think for me, the way I've parented is kind of, that most of the time the kids eat really well.
Yeah.
And they know how it feels to eat well. And an occasional treat is not going to, a party here and there
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really be mindful, I think, of what you do with your kids with treats and parties.
Yeah. And blanket, like you said, having that total blanket ban, that all or nothing approach to food.
Yeah. It's more teaching them,
Yes.
when you eat this, I wonder if you're going to feel this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what if you slowed down? Or at Easter, wouldn't it be cool if you saved them
Made it
and
last.
had exactly. Yeah. So what are your tips for finding harmony and balance with treats?
Yeah, look, for me, obviously, instead of banning treats, if there's any opportunity, like I said, to perhaps offer the least detrimental treat.
Yep.
So again, for me, that looks like, instead of Doritos, plain chips would be a better choice. So they're still having the treat in form of like plain salted chips.
Yep.
Or plain salted corn chips,
Yes.
as opposed to something that has a lot of additives and colours. And, these days there's a lot of great alternatives. You can even get store-bought chips now that are cooked in olive oil as opposed to vegetable oil or avocado oil. And they're available in supermarkets, whereas that used to be you'd only get it at some weird hippie shop, you know. And as I said before, if when my kids were little, it was, and even now, they kind of know that they're better off if they're choosing a chocolate. They're better off choosing like Maltesers or plain dairy milk chocolate as opposed to caramel filled chocolate or caramello koala, or I'm trying to think of the name of M&Ms, for example.
With all the colours.
With all the colours. They know that they're better off with a Malteser that's a better choice. So, and it doesn't mean now that they're teenagers they always take that choice, but they do understand the difference between,
the better of two evils.
Exactly.
You know what? As you're talking about offering nutrient-dense alternatives, I'm also thinking of, as a family, what you label as treats. Like a mango can be a treat.
Yeah.
Or berries can be a treat. Yeah. And just kind of...
Yeah. I think, absolutely. I mean, I use the term treat in terms of everyone kind of understands that as perhaps a processed food.
Yes.
I always feel really conflicted when I use the word treat because, like you said, for me, that's not like technically that's not something that is benefiting the person that's eating it in any way, shape, or form. So definitely, like a mango would be a better treat.
Yes,
but I think in terms of just everyone understanding what we're going on about, we have to use this word treat. Yeah. The other tip I'd say is just setting limits, rather than having a blanket ban. I do think that limits are important. It helps to teach moderation. It helps to prevent overindulgence. When my kids were little, I always had treat days. So treat days basically looked like we negotiated and discussed that twice a week they were going to have a treat, or 3 times a week. I'm just using this as examples. You can come up with your own solution for treat days, but for us it was kind of, I think it was twice a week, parties didn't count kind of thing. And it meant that when we were in the supermarket and my kids spotted a Kinder Surprise, for example, that was one of their favourites, and they'd start badgering me, Mum, buy a Kinder Surprise, and I'd say, well, okay, is today a treat day? And we determined that, I don't know, Tuesdays and Fridays were treat days. And they'd say, well, no, it's not a treat day, but please let me have the Kinder Surprise. And I'd say, okay, we can buy the Kinder Surprise now and we'll put it in the cupboard and you can have it on your treat day. So that taught them delayed gratification.
Definitely.
They still got the treat, but they didn't get to eat it until it was a treat day.
But I also love how you've collaborated with them.
Yeah.
It's a choice you've made. Like, okay, these are our treat
absolutely.
days.
And it worked really well. And I know Friday was always a treat day because they got tuck shop. That was their day that they got tuck shop.
Yeah.
And so part of their tuck shop was, buying. Generally, they made pretty healthy choices with regards to the main part of their tuck lunch. And we discussed that again. We'd said, like sushi is a great alternative. They had some, great like meat salad roll kind of things, wraps and stuff. And they'd choose that. But then they'd also get a treat, which they loved because they loved the fact that they had like a packet of Ovaltinis, and while all their friends, or they got like an ice block or something like that. So, look, treat days worked really, really well for us, just from removing that the pressure and the badgering for treats for us. That really, it was just like the boundary was clear.
Yeah.
We have 2 treat days a week. If you're lucky enough to go to a party on the weekend, then, you get
and
that as well. And
they can look forward to those treat days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And apparently that looking forward is amazing for our brain and for the different endorphins in our brain.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. I didn't know that at the time, but that's great. Added bonus.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've talked about leading by example. Leading by example is so important. Watching us as parents, if we're, if we're enjoying treats in moderation, they're more likely to develop those same habits.
Yeah.
And also just education, talking to your kids about the importance of nutrition and how treats fit into a balanced diet. It just helps them to make informed choices. And as I said, talking to them about the better of two evils, like if they're out with their friends and they have a choice of buying a particular rainbow paddle pop as opposed to a chocolate paddle pop, well, I'd go for the chocolate paddle pop if that's what you're feeling like. So just giving them enough information. You don't have to go into detail about, I've heard of parents teaching their kids about how to look at labels and work out sugar content. I think that's fine when they're older, like older teenagers, but I personally never did that with my kids when they were little. I didn't need them to do that.
Yeah. I did used to say, like around probably 10, 8, 9, 10, I did used to say, can you see all these numbers on the wrapper?
Yeah.
This is not real food.
Totally.
Our body doesn't know what to do
what
with
we
this.
do with it.
Yeah. And I would just say that and drop it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely no harping on about this stuff.
Yeah.
But just, finding harmony between treats and nutrition in your child's diet. It's just about balance and moderation in it, isn't it? And it is an important life skill, like you've already discussed. So, by offering or educating them about healthier alternatives, setting limits and boundaries around treats, leading by example, just educating your kids, you can definitely help them to develop a healthy relationship with food that just lasts a lifetime. And I think that's a real gift.
Totally.